everybody to our presentation around secondary transfer. We call it The Journey Continues because it is a journey, and it's a journey that we want to take with you and be part of in relation to your young people starting to think about secondary school. It probably only seems 5 minutes ago we were introducing them to nursery and reception, and all of a sudden we're now starting to think about that big step into secondary preparation for adulthood and what the future might bring for them. Thank you, Tracy. So what I hope to cover this evening on my part of the whistle-stop tour, if you like, of secondary transition is meeting the team. We have some of the team with us today who will go through where we are now in your journey, in your process, what the process actually is, what happens next, which is always the big question, where can I get help, and then we'll do questions at the end of the presentation this evening to give you time to ask and answer, hopefully, anything that we can for you. So our team, so if I can ask the team just to put their cameras on for those that are here. We have some of the team with us today. Unfortunately, not all the team could make it this evening, but we do have a primary team, and that primary team consists of 7 EHCP coordinators who will be responsible for your children's EHCP plans. So on that, we have Nicola Lynch, Judith Fadure, Doris Gitzo, Natasha Laker, Charlotte Stewart, Zara Johnson, and we have here Ray, but Ray is actually leaving us. She's an agency worker, but tonight you can see Jodie Mathers, who is online with us, and she is our new EHCP coordinator. So your children will be responsible to one of my EHCP coordinators, and the way that we allocate those is by school. So each coordinator will be responsible for the school your young person attends, and so you're going to get to know them really well over the next year or so, in the fact that they will be at your annual reviews. They will get to know you because of the conversations that we're going to be having about secondary transfer, and they're going to be the ones that are completing the paperwork, consulting with our secondary schools and finalising the plans as we move your young people into their next step of their education. So where are we now in this process? Well, as I say, currently EHCP coordinators will be dealing with the phase transfer for you. There should be, at this point in time, a Year 5 annual review that will be taking place either this term, next term, or may have taken place at the end of last term. But basically that Year 5 annual review is a crucial review going forward in relation to us amending and updating the EHCP for your young person thinking about Year 7. Now, for us, this is a big jump, and I know for you as parents, this is a huge jump. But what we have to do is, because the law requires us, under the Children and Families Act 2014, to make sure that your children's placements are in place prior to the mainstream children and the mainstream schools, we have to, in schools admission process, we have to start this process a little bit earlier. So it does feel like we're having very early conversations when we're actually thinking about placement realistically for September 2024. And this is where we get confused, so bear with me because I'm still doing the September 2023 ones. So we're always working a year ahead of ourselves. So it's a long way down the road, but we do have to start that journey now. And so what we need to do is make sure that the EHCPs are updated that reflects the need for secondary placement. And this is based on the professional reports and advice, professional reports coming from SALT, OT, EP, school. Your school is your professional advice. You as parents, the young person themselves, their voice is crucial within this. So we bring all of that together. It could be other outside agencies as well, and we can go from there. Can we go back one slide? Sorry, Tracy.
Sorry, I didn't realise I'd gone ahead. Sorry.
That's okay. I can talk quick, but that's even impressive for me. So what is the process and what we're talking about tonight? We're talking about the EHCP process of secondary phase transfer. So this starts at your Year 5 annual review. For your schools and for your agencies that are working with you, this starts prior to your annual review. because we need all of those reports amended and updated for your annual review. So you may already be in the process of getting up-to-date reports. You may be already in the position of looking at what evidence we currently have. Now, it doesn't mean that we have to update everything, and it doesn't mean that you will always have everything updated. It's the relevance of the information currently that is there, and it will be for us to consider what do we need now to amend the plans accordingly. So in July this year, in 2023, you will be sent a letter, and we will ask you for your parental preferences in relation to secondary placement. So by then, we will have held the annual review. We will have amended the plan to reflect what we think your young person needs going into secondary, whether that's a maintained mainstream school, whether that's a specialist school. If it's a specialist school, what type of specialist school, whether it's one of our art provisions in secondary provision. We will look to be having those conversations with you from your review and from the evidence to think about that. But you as parents, like any other parent, have a right to ask the local authority and give a parental preference of what school you want your young person to go to. I use the word here, preference, because I do have to stress that as we talk through the process going forward, sometimes you as parents may have a view that's different to the evidence or the local authority's view, and the local authority has a slightly different legal requirement in the sense that we have a duty to find a school that meets the SEN needs of your young person, and that we have a duty to find possibly a mainstream school rather than a named mainstream school. So we will always work with you. We will always take this journey, as we've said at the beginning, with you. But this is a parental preference. It's not a parental right. So we will have those discussions with you. We will then consider your parental preferences, and we will look to start what we call formal consultations to school in September 2023. So this means that we have to use the current EHCP that's been amended with all the additional appendices, reports, information, with your up-to-date information about your child, with your child's voice about what they want. We'll all go into that document and we send that out to the secondary schools. So we send that out to our specialist schools or our maintained schools. We send it out to other local authorities. You don't have to stay within Merton. It may be that you want a school outside of Merton. We can consult outside of Merton within a reasonable distance. If you ask me, can I have a school in Devon? I'm liable to say no, because the journey might take too long to get there. But within a reasonable distance of our Kingston, Surrey, Sutton, Wandsworth, Croydon, Lambeth, all of those sorts of schools, we can consult with, because again, it's parental preference. We consult with the schools in September with that paperwork. And what we have to then do is get a requirement back from the schools to say that they can meet need and that it is appropriate, because legally we have to make sure that on your child's EHCP, we've named their secondary school by February the 15th, 2024. And this is what I'm saying. It feels like it's a long way away, but actually it's surprising how quick the time goes. And we have to do that in accordance with the Code of Practice 2015 and the Children and Families Act 2014. So who gets consulted and why? Well, we've mentioned here about special schools. We've mentioned here about maintained mainstream schools. We have a variety of schools that we can consult. So we have non-maintained special schools. So that might be our schools like, we might be thinking about, sorry, my brain's gone, it's been a long day. Non-maintained special schools, so we may be thinking about
Brookways would be one.
Brookways into, thank you, Fran. Sorry, my brain has gone. It's been one to say Brookways, but there are independent schools. There are schools that are not maintained, if you can, not looked after by the local authority. We have maintained schools or nurseries, so mainstream or special. So that could be our Rains Park, our Rutlishes schools, our Rickards. It could be our Cricket Green schools, our Passade schools, our Melrose schools. We may want to consult with a Section 41 school, which is under Section 41, we're talking about the DFE list that exists of non-maintained schools, which are independent schools. Some of them are on what's called a Section 41 list because they are inspected and they are managed, if you like, by the government, by Ofsted, in the same way as our schools. And there are some schools that operate on what's called non-Section 41 schools, where they are inspected independently in a different way. We're going to come on to this a little bit more later. It does get a bit technical, but it's really important that we share this information with you. And of course, we might be thinking about academies, and we consult with academies. So academies being, we could be thinking about our Harris academies in Merton. There are other Oasis academies in other boroughs, and some of our special schools are academies. For instance, Link, for instance, would be an academy as well. So the LA can only refuse to consult. So when you give us a preference, we can only refuse to consult with your parental preference based on set things. And again, these are from the law and from the code. If the setting is unsuitable for the age, ability, aptitude, or special needs of the child or young person. So that one's self-explanatory. If the school's not going to be able to meet their needs, and we think that actually a consultation isn't in the best interest of the child or young person, then we would be thinking about saying no. If the attendance of the child or young person would be incompatible with the provision of the efficient education of others. So by your young person attending the school, it would impact significantly on others. Now that's a very high bar to prove, and it's a very high bar to prove when we haven't already had your young person in the school. But it could be that if your child displayed particular challenging behaviours and it would stop other children learning by those behaviours being in the classroom, we could look at the efficient education of others. And then what we have is the attendance of the child or young person would be incompatible with the efficient use of resources. So this is where we have another hat in the local authority. Of course, we work to the best interests of the young person, and we want the young person to get their best education in the best provision available. But we do have to look at also the public spend, because we do have a limited budget. It's a big budget, but it's a limited budget. And we do have to think about how we can fairly distribute that funds and the public taxpayers' money when we're looking to provide that education for young people. So this is where we may get into discussions about independent schools that cost, extremely more money than maybe a maintained special school or one of our own schools. So as a local authority, we do have to consider the public purse and the public spend. And so sometimes we will be having those conversations with you. And the last is the provision is not a Section 41 school. So these are the schools where I was saying that we have some independent schools that do not register in the same way as other schools. If they are not a Section 41 school, we do have the legal right to say we will not consult with them based on the fact of that piece of information. We do, however, have the right to consult with them if we feel it's the right provision for the young person. So it's not saying that we will never consult with a Section 41 school. That is something that is done on an individual basis, on the evidence and on the needs of the young person. Thank you, Tracy. So as we've started, you can already see it's a complicated business. And we do this year in, year out, where for you, it's the journey that you're taking now. So where can you get the help during this time? Where can we get you the help that means that we can start thinking about how we can consult effectively and get your young people the schools they require? So the first stop is your Senko or your school. They've had your young person now, either from nursery or reception or a couple of years in, but they've had your young person for a long period of time. They will know them. You know your child the best as the expert, as a parent. There is a wealth of expertise around you from the people we're about to talk about that can also help and guide and support you in this journey. So your Senko in your school will know your young people. They will know them in an educational sense. They will know them within an educational environment. And they will be able to help you think about what it is that your young person will need when they move to secondary school and how best that can be met. You also have your EHCP coordinators. Now, they're experts, but not as good maybe as the schools, but they're experts. Don't tell them that though, because they'll get a little bit big-headed and we don't want that. But they're experts in the process. So they know all of the schools, they understand the context of the consultations, they've been through the process, and they will know your young person from the evidence and information and from the discussions with you. So they can help you think about the next steps on what we can offer going forward. What we are not allowed to do as local authority officers, and this is where our next group of experts come in, is Myas, is we're not allowed to actually direct you to schools. We have to remain independent as officers of the council, because we don't want to seem as though we are a bias towards one school or the other. But we can have those open and transparent conversations with you, and we can have those discussions with you, and we want to have those discussions with you about what's best going forward for your young people. But then we have our independent service through Myas, and they're going to speak soon about their service and what Fran and Shazia do and the amazing job they do in supporting our young people forward. And I think that what we get from Myas is that independent advice, that independent role from the local authority, and particularly if we're getting into those difficult conversations, and we will, with some of you, be having difficult conversations, we know that, about placement and thinking about what you want for your young person going forward and what the local authority view may be. And we work really well alongside our colleagues in Myas to be able to make sure that we come to a conclusion in the best interest. So absolutely key to this process is working with Myas as well. And of course, without a doubt, Kids First, because Kids First will be the voice of reason as parents. And parents talking to parents is the biggest supporter going. We can give you the advice we can give you, but actually parents that have been on this journey, parents that have come through this the other side, will be able to give you that support and knowledge and experience that will help you in some of that decision making going forward. And so really there is that wealth of knowledge in Merton out there that when we combine it together will give you a real balanced approach to being able to pick the right school for your young person going forward. So I'm going to stop talking at the moment, which is amazing because I don't do it very often. And I'm going to hand over to Fran. Fran's going to talk a little bit about Myas, and then I'm going to come back in and join you at the end to round the session up.
Lovely, thank you, Georgie. And thank you, Tracy, for, if you're all right to continue with our slides, that would be brilliant. So the next one, please. Thank you. So yeah, so my name's Fran, and I'll give a bit more of an introduction to my colleagues, but basically we're Myas. Myas stands for Merton Information Advice and Support Service. And we are a statutory service, so it's under the Children and Families Act. And you may, in other boroughs, have heard of CENDIAS. So we're the CENDIAS service for Merton residents. And there's 3 of us in the team, and we give advice and guidance, as I say, on health, social care, and mostly education. And we cover 0 to 25. And obviously we can help you with advice and guidance on this particularly important transition. So as I say, I'm Fran, I'm the manager, and I usually casework cases in early years up to around year 5, and also appeals and complex cases. So as part of our statutory remit, we can also give you advice and support you up to and including appeals, and that includes if necessary. Fortunately, Merton is a local authority with a low level of tribunals, but we do from time to time have a few tribunals, and we can support you with those as well. I work full-time, I'm around in the school holidays as well, so you can always reach out to us in the holidays as well. We don't work term time only, and I operate a drop-in at a children's centre once a week, basically aimed at early years parents, but also see other parents there as well. And I'm going to hand over to my colleague Shazia to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, good evening. My name is Shazia Khan. I'm the child and young person support worker, and I usually take cases from year 6 and above. So I'm usually giving advice and guidance on the secondary transfer as well. Again, I'm working full time, not term time only, so I'll be around in school holidays as well. And I've got planned regular drop-ins for the young people at colleges. Hopefully that should be starting soon. Done some drop-ins at children's centres and at primary schools as well. Hoping we'll have set dates for them in the future, but that's me. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Shazia. And then we've got a new recruit. So Kate Potter started with us in November. So I'm just going to ask Kate just to briefly introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name is Kate Potter. I started with Myas in November. I will be answering the phones, also managing the Myas inbox, so I will often be your first point of contact. So hello.
Lovely, thanks Kate. And as Kate says, she will be answering. I don't know how many of you historically have tried to get hold of us, but we do get very busy, and our waiting list unfortunately did rise to around 4 weeks. However, I'll talk about that a little bit more, but hopefully with Kate in post, once she's fully inducted, we'll let you know what time she's available for you to speak to and ask maybe some basic questions, just so at least you can get an idea of when you might be able to speak to one of us or get some fact sheets or something like that. So we're hoping that that's going to cut our waiting time down, and can only apologise to those of you who might have been trying to get hold of us. Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, so we receive, I don't know, Kate, you're either going to nod or, I don't know, 8 to 10 phone calls a day on average. Would you say are still around that? So we do, there is just 3 of us in the team. We do try and make work really smart. That's why we have drop-ins, etc. We do try and respond to your phone calls and emails and date orders. And if it is urgent, as I say, we do try and get back to you as quick as we can, but sometimes it is as much as 4 weeks. And hopefully that is going to reduce down. We do keep a record of all our calls received. I'm sure Kate again is going to nod at that because she has the job of maintaining the Myas inbox, recording it. So I'm just going to turn my phone's making noises at me. So yes, so we do return them in date order, so please do bear with us. If it's an emergency, however, if there's safeguarding involved, and again, you know, Kate knows this, that she'll alert me and say there's actually a meeting tomorrow morning or next week the parent needs some support with, and we will try and get back to you more quickly. And obviously if there's appeals, because appeals have statutory deadlines. And during the pandemic, we discovered the joys of telephone appointments, which I'm not sure why we didn't do them before. But again, we can offer you a telephone appointment, and then we can have face-to-face meetings, and we can come to meetings at the school with you. So we don't just advise you on schools, we can advise you on a wide range of issues. And generally, a lot of our advice is actually signposting to other services. But as Georgie said, we can specifically give you advice and guidance on schools. Thanks, Tracy. Next slide. So I just thought I'd just give you an overview. A lot of what I'm going to talk about is going to be repeating what Georgie's talked about. We are an impartial and confidential advice and guidance service. So the idea is that when you speak to us, the local authority doesn't have access to our paperwork. We don't have access to their paperwork. So often the first thing Kate might ask you for is to arrange for your EHCP or your child's EHCP to be sent over to us. And then we keep notes of our discussion, and generally quite often parents and young people want us to speak to the local authority because they're in touch with us because things aren't going right or they need a bit of advice and guidance, but we'll only do that with your consent or if you raise an issue that we feel has to be escalated because of its nature. So the way we can help in this specific area that we're talking about today, which is transition from primary to secondary, we can go through reports with you. Often some of the reports, I've had to phone a friend before reading a report with a family. We can help you understand maybe where you are in the process. Some of you might be about to receive an EHCP or have only had one fairly recently, so it's all quite new to you. And we can also help you with visits to schools as well. We can then come along to the annual review that Georgie's talked about with you. We can go through the paperwork with that, and if we can't attend it, we can often give you advice before and after. And then when it comes to giving your parental preferences, as Georgie said, and you might talk to other professionals as well, such as EPs or speech and language therapists. And generally the idea is we're here as an impartial advice and guidance service to give you recommendations of schools based on the paperwork you show us and what your parental preferences are. And then the next step, as Georgie said again, is that the local authority then sends out your EHCP to the schools which they feel meet that criteria that she went through. And then the schools then have 15 days to respond. And if they say, no, we can't meet needs, the local authority can challenge that decision. And then obviously, finally, and the majority of cases, this happens and goes through quite smoothly. Step 5, the school is then named in the EHCP, and there is this deadline of the 15th of February 2024. Nothing in particular happens after the 15th of February, but it is a deadline that the local authority will try their very best to adhere to. So you may experience, as you come up towards that deadline, this time next year, a flurry of activity from the local authority as they seek to show that they're being timely by having their EHCPs issued by them. Thanks, Tracy. So yeah, so a little bit more about us. Most of our service users are on the spectrum or are children or young people on the spectrum. And we signpost regularly to other services like MAPS, the Merton Autism Parent Services, and other support service. Some of the things we don't do is we don't do what we call doubling up. So if you've already got an advisor that you're very happy with, that's absolutely fine. Not a problem for us at all. But we don't usually stay involved because it can be just confusing for you as parents. Because we are so we can't say we're an independent service because our salaries are paid for by the local authority. We're an impartial service, and we work slightly differently to how other advisors might work. And we're very fortunate in Merton to work very closely with the local authority to try and resolve some of the difficult decisions that the local authority and parents have to make. And other local authorities may not necessarily work that way, and other advisors may not work that way as well. We also don't provide what's called an official advocacy service, and none of us are trained advocates. But as I say, we work to DfE and Department of Health minimum standards, and we signpost to other services as well, but we're not lawyers as such. And we support up to including appeals. I've mentioned that, and I regularly talk to the local authority about cases that are stuck, usually once a month, and anything that we're a bit concerned about, and you as parents have said to us, you know, we're worried we haven't heard from somebody. So thanks. Yeah, so as I say, we're a confidential service, and we don't have access to the paperwork, I said, unless you consent. So that's why initially your first contact might be with Kate, and she might say, well, can you ask your EHCP coordinator to send it through, and then it's secure as well. Next slide. Thanks, Tracy. Yeah, so I just rather liked this picture. So I'm going to talk a bit more about the law, a bit more about what Georgie went into. Now, Tracy is going to send out these slides, and as we know, this is being recorded. So please don't think by the end of this, you're going to understand every legal nuance of this. I talk about this regularly. I'll try and take it quite slow, but I'm not expecting all of you to understand all the legal thresholds and all the legal parts that you need to know about by the end of this. So that's why there's the actual law is set out in these following slides. Thanks, Tracy. So year 5 onwards. So first of all, I've been splitting things into 3, and it's not just because we're fortunate enough now to be a team of 3, I don't think, but 3 does seem to be the theme for me tonight. So there's 3 kind of legal pieces of the framework that you need to be aware of when you're moving through this decision-making process. And the first is your parental preference. So you've got the local authority has a legal obligation to consult with your parental preference, as long as it's those schools that Georgie talked about. Now, sometimes the local authority will want to consult with other schools because actually all of the schools that they're consulting with might be full, or may not be able to meet needs. So sometimes there's that's the reason why the local authority might still consult with your parental preference, even if it's not on this list. So that's the legal criteria set out there. And then the reasons why they won't consult, again, Georgie went through those, and that's if the school's not compatible with your child's needs, if it's inefficient use of resources, or incompatible with efficient education of the other children in the school. So, so for example, if a child needs a completely bespoke curriculum in order to access a mainstream school, it's quite likely that the school would have to set up a separate classroom, etc., and that will cost them a lot of money. So it's a very strange phrase. It's incompatible with efficient education of children. But I often think about it as sort of disability discrimination, that every school has a duty to make reasonable adjustments up to a certain level in order to ensure that children and young people with additional needs can be educated in school. So if you think about it that way, I think that's often quite a useful way to think of it. Thanks, Tracy. And then the second one is this right to mainstream. So there is also enshrined in the law, and it's from the older part of the law, that every child has a right to mainstream education. You may have heard of this. And again, the only time when that can be overturned come by the local authority. It's in specific legal basis, but it's an additional legal right, if you like. And it's not a right to a particular mainstream school. And Georgie and the local authority may have mentioned to you ARPs or bases or units, and they are smaller schools attached to secondary schools. And there are some in other boroughs. And as the local authority said, you can also ask to consult with the ARPs in other boroughs as well as in Merton, but that would count as a mainstream school. And so basically, if you wish your child to be in a mainstream school, then the local authority has to consider that. And again, we've got the arguments then that they can only not name a mainstream school for those reasons. However, as I say, it's not the right to a particular school. And again, think disability discrimination. Thanks, Tracy. And then think about independent schools. So we've got our list of schools the local authority has to consult with, and then we have other schools which may be on your list for a wide range of reasons. These are obviously generally independent schools. That doesn't mean that some of the, as Georgie said, you know, the terminology is very complex here, and it will take a while for you to unpick this. And that's generally your EHCP coordinator will be your first point of contact, but we can also help you think through before you give your parental preferences, possible schools. So if you are making representations to the local authority, say we want you to consult with this particular school, then the local authority does have to adhere to this general principle that a child has to be educated in accordance with parental wishes. So it's not an absolute, but they have to consider that. And also they have to take into account a young person's views, wishes and feelings as well. The difference is that if you request the school which was on Georgie's list, we call it that list, the list she had, then the local authority has to, but they can only refuse to consult with a school of your choice and show you why it's not possible. But when we come to independent settings, you have to show that the local authority school can't meet the needs and that the independent school you're putting forward is the only one that can. And sometimes that does happen. And I know there are families who have got their children in independent schools, and that's because they have been through this process with the local authority. Thanks, Tracy. So year 5 onwards, so just a bit of an overview. We're here to help. We can support you up to and including appeals, but we don't double up. We're currently, it says up to 12 months for a hearing at tribunal. But that is absolutely 12 months. So sorry, I'm getting a bit of feedback on I don't know if anybody else is.
If I'm just going to see if I can ensure that everyone's muted. Yes, I am getting feedback.
Just as it's recording, I don't want to.
Could everyone mute themselves, please? We can hear a child in the background, I think. Yeah, I think it's been resolved. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you all. Yeah, we realise it's that time of the evening, isn't it? It's not a great time, given that it's tea time, etc. But yeah, just to reiterate again, the tribunal. So you have this right of appeal. You can also go through other informal dispute resolution processes with the local authority. You don't only have to go to tribunal, but at the moment the tribunals are very overwhelmed and they're taking up to 12 months to give a hearing date. Sometimes it is shorter for what they call phase transfer cases. They do try and prioritise those, but just don't think it's a quick fix. The other option you can do, so let's say the local authority puts forward a school and you're not sure if it can meet needs and you're just not sure, you can also request an early interim review once your child starts at the local authority's chosen school. And if the school then says, look, we don't think we can meet needs, you're in a stronger position then to challenge the local authority's decision. The local authority is likely to be able to work with you to find an alternative. So that's also an alternative. Do visit the school if you can, obviously a lot more possible. We can also take you to and from school visits as well. I went to one on Friday. We can't go with every parent to every school. As I often say, that would be a lovely job. I would love to do that all week long. But where we've not visited the schools, and we're happy to go along with you. So please do let us know if you're going to an open day, and if you're struggling to get there or you need help with transport, we can possibly help with that as well. And speak to your child. you know, they are at the centre of all this, and that's the reason why we're all here, really, isn't it? To make sure it's a really good, successful transition for them. And the majority of our young people do successfully transition into mainstream schools and do really well. But we are there to help you where it doesn't go so well. And as I say, the voice of the child is absolutely key. And I'm going to hand over to Shazia now, who's our child and young person support worker you met at the beginning, who's going to talk to you a little bit about that. Thanks, Shazia.
Thank you, Fran. Hi, so I just wanted to let you know about children and young people's voices. So just a bit on the law. SEND Code of Practice 2015 states that local authorities must ensure that children, their parents and young people are involved in discussions and decisions about their individual support and about local provision. Early year providers, schools and colleges should also take steps to ensure that young people and parents are actively supported in contributing to needs assessments, developing and reviewing education healthcare plan. So I do attend a lot of the Year 5 annual reviews, and it's just important to get as much of the child's voice as possible, as well as the parents' views as well. So usually you have like a questionnaire coming a couple of weeks before the annual review to gather the parents' views, and the child usually gathers their views with someone at school. And also ensure the child's parents or the young person are fully included in the EHC needs assessment process from the start, and they're fully aware of their opportunities to offer views and information and are consulted about the content of the plan. Lovely, thank you. Next slide, please. So, I mean, I've done a lot of work with young children and young people, hearing their voices. And this is the standard Merton template that is used. I'm not sure if that's due to change soon, but that's what they're currently using at the moment.
We are, just so you're right there, Shazia, we are reviewing all our annual review paperwork at the moment. So it could be a slightly different form that people see, but as soon as we know that's coming out, we'll let people know.
Lovely, thank you so much, Georgie. And the next one is just like a standard template that I've used in the past. Sorry, Tracy, next slide, please. Lovely. This is just breaking it down basically, rather than doing the whole form. It's just talking about what is working well and what is not working well. They can add pictures in, just do one word keywords in there. So that's one of the templates I've used. And the next one, sorry, Tracy, next one. This is a bit more visual, just a few words in the picture about what's going well, what support they would need, and you know, their aspirations, where they would like to be at the end of this road. So that's one I've used as well previously. Next slide, please. There's other ways of engaging children and young people. They can actually make their own PowerPoint presentation, use their own pictures, colours, things that's really important to them. A lot of them like to do comic strips as well, so it could be just anime or that sort of stuff. They could even make a video, just have a little script, you know, what's going well and what they'd like to see more support with, or even record their voice. If they're not confident enough to speak in the annual review, they can ask someone to write it out for them, or read it for them, should I say. So it's, you know, so it's prepared, their voices down, and then someone can read it on their behalf. And also just basic pictures as well, smiley faces, scoring, facial body expressions for the less verbal ones. Next slide, please.
Lovely, thanks, Shazia.
Sorry, thank you.
Lovely, thank you. I hope that's given you kind of a few ideas about how to engage with your young person or child. And it, you know, as Shazia pointed out, it does say in the SEN Code of Practice that their voice should be at the heart of everything we do. And we try to encourage schools, and I know the local authority does the same thing, to actually ask for the young person's views and wishes, so they get used to being an agent in their own lives, really, and having that power and control and that experience of being spoken to and being listened to by adults. So here's a few top tips. I find this really hard to read. It goes into, it's my choice of fonts, but it still makes me laugh. Do prepare for any of the reviews that we've talked about by reading the paperwork. The paperwork, the EHCP will obviously be the one that's sent out to your chosen secondary school, so it's important that you feel comfortable with it. Georgie mentioned about asking around about recommendations for schools, and do ask around the professional network around your child, family members, etc. as well. It is ultimately your decision and your child's decision, and we understand that, but it is about not seeing it as just being on your own, that you can reach out and speak to other people as well, and make it a bit more collaborative, and so you feel a bit more confident, which brings me on to my next point about being positive. You know, children and young people, they watch us, don't they? And they know when we're feeling anxious or stressed or worried. It's a very exciting time of change for them. And for some of us, you know, it can be a big challenge as well. And it's just we all try and stay positive about it. As I say, the majority of young people and children make this transition very successfully. Your child's voice, absolutely, you know, it's really important they feel they've been listened to, etc. And be open-minded. You know, experience, I was told that my child definitely wouldn't be able to attend X or Y at school and would definitely need X. So I went off in one direction looking at schools, only to find out she was able to attend a totally different type of school. So I found myself kind of having to spin on a sixpence, if you like, and rethink. So it is about being open-minded, because they do change a lot in year 5 and year 6 as well. And yeah, that's kind of our thoughts really about the top tips for this time. And by coming along now to this presentation, I think you've done a really good job of putting yourselves in a really good position to make this really successful. Thanks very much, Tracy. And yeah, questions. I'm thinking, unless I can't see the chat, I've seen a few things flashing up. I'm thinking, Tracy, that we take questions at the end, or do you want to? Because George has got a few more slides. Yeah,
take them at the end. Yeah, that'd be fine.
Perfect. So there's our contact details. There's our landline number there, which obviously will be answered by Kate as and when she's in the office. She works term time only. Our email address, again, monitored by Kate. That's our email, and it is looked at every day by one of us. As I say, we record our casework on a completely separate, confidential, paperless database from the local authority. And please do remember the local offer. The local offer is a part of the Merton website, and there's lots of schools and information on there about activities and support groups. Kids First details are on there, youth clubs, etc. And Contact is the name of a charity, so that's just on the left hand side of my slide there. They've got a really good website. They do some really good fact sheets on things like disability living allowance. They've got a helpline that's very good as well, so do check out their website. And they're a charity for families with children who are disabled or have got additional needs, and they're funded by the government as well, as we are. And that's the end of my presentation. It's just over to Georgie now, I think, for a few last slides.
Thank you, Fran. And I hope what we can show you is how we do work together, as they say, as Fran said, very much so in partnership, but Fran being independent of the local authority, but it gives us the opportunity to support you the best way we can. So just to recap, you've heard really the process up until now. So we are talking about the phased transfer of secondary, going from primary to secondary school in September 2024. We've talked about the importance of the annual review at the point that we'll be starting those meetings now if you haven't already had them. What I didn't stress and will stress is you should have your coordinator at your year 5 annual review, as I would expect my coordinators to be attending every year 5 annual review to start those discussions with you and take you on that journey. If you don't get a year 5 annual review with a coordinator, let me know. I'd like to know why we're in this position. And obviously we've talked about the legal framework a little bit around what is involved in secondary transfer, because it is a legal process that we have to follow in accordance with the Code of Practice and with the Children and Families Act. But I think what I would like to talk about now is what happens if we disagree, because it is a challenging time for everybody involved. It is also a joyous time for us. We're seeing our young people grow up. We're seeing our young people take their next step on their journey. We're seeing them move towards independence. We're seeing them find themselves as a young adolescent, going into young adulthood. So it is also a really positive time, but it is a challenging time because it is one of the biggest decisions, again, as parents, you have to make, whether your child has additional SEN needs or not. And so sometimes we are going to disagree. Sometimes you may have a view that says, well, actually, I do want, you know, my child to go to this school, or I want them to go to that school. I want them to have this provision. I want to be able to get them there this way. What do we do if we disagree? The first thing I would say to you is talk to us, communicate with us. Communication is key to this whole process. We are here to talk with you and communicate with you through this process. We're here to make sure, as we said at the beginning, your young people get this education they deserve and the education that's right for them. So if you have got some concerns, you're worried, you're not sure about process, you're thinking about something but you're not sure, talk to us. Drop us an email, give us a call. We are here. We want to make this journey as smooth as possible. There will sometimes come a point when the local authority may make a decision that you disagree with. The local authority may say, actually, on the evidence and everything that we see and on the public purse and on the school that you want, but we feel, we may come to a decision that you don't agree with. That's where we do have the tribunal process that Fran spoke about. And you can appeal through the SEN tribunal process if you do not agree with the local authority's decision. And this really is an important thing to remember. This is why we want to get those plans amended and done by February the 15th, because at the end of the day, we want to give the tribunals an opportunity for them to read and see the paperwork to be able to make that third party decision. Going to tribunal is a legal process. It is a court process. There is a legal panel, if you like, that has a legal person from if you like, the judge, the chair of the panel, and there are two professional lay people who will have a wealth of experience and knowledge in SEN. And so that panel is like a third party who will see both sides of the discussion, both sides of the information, and will then make a decision in accordance with the evidence that they have. So, you know, sometimes we do have to go down that process, but what I would say to you is if we are at that process, we will have had so many discussions from a local authority. You'll be fed up of seeing me, you'll be fed up of seeing the coordinators, but we will be talking to you all throughout that process, and we will be having those formal mediations leading into that possibly as part of that process. But we will work with you, and that's the message I want really to take away from today's meeting. So what provision we have in Merton? So we have a variety of provision in Merton, but I think there's some key ones we want to talk about, and I think probably what we need to do is update this presentation going forward a little bit so that we can talk about all our provision now. But Whatley provision and Whatley campus is our new provision that's come into the borough in the last year. So one of the things that we noticed from Fran's presentation is she talked about the significance of our ASD cohort in Merton. We know that we have a large group of young people that need specialist provision moving forward. And this has been one of those groups that has, in the past, I would say, for most of, you know, some of those young people, where we have used the non-maintained independent sector. So we're talking about our highly specialist schools in the non-maintained sector. So what we did as Merton is we recognised the need that we needed to have our own provision. And so we commissioned Melrose School to open a further campus, which we now have as Whatley campus. It's now been established since September and is thriving. We have over 40 students there now who are making good progress and developing their skills towards their independence, as we say, going through from year 5 at the current through to year 11, although we don't have a year 11 cohort there yet at the moment. And so if I can go to the next slide, Tracy. What Whatley is it's an extension of our Melrose. It comes under our Melrose School, but their remit is for children that have ASD and SEMH. As I said, their secondary school is there, and we have primary as well, going from ages 9 to 11 in primary. It is for children with complex needs, including ASD, SLCN needs. And it's a pathway where we can offer a variety of educational attainments moving forward, including GCSEs, but also there would be maybe entry levels and possibly, and we're developing that as the school develops going forward. We are also looking in Merton strategically to see if we can open more specialist provision, but we also have our Cricket Green School, which is our school for children with ASD again, but MLD, moderate learning difficulties. We have Perseid, which is our children that have maybe ASD, but with also severe learning difficulties and complex, profound, multiple learning difficulties. And we have 2 campuses for Perseid, primary and secondary, and we have a all-through school for Cricket Green. Melrose also has what we call our Melrose SEMH primary and secondary, which is our children that have social, emotional, mental health issues. What a title, I don't like that one, but we have to say it. And we also have our provision for our most complex children within Melrose, slightly older children that will have bespoke packages, and young people going forward to try and make sure we can give them the best opportunities in preparation for adulthood. We have our ARPs, additional resource provisions, in our secondary schools. So Rains Park has our ASD ARP. So the young people are in mainstream schools, they're accessing mainstream curriculums, but they have time within our specific provision, accessing therapies, accessing interventions, a smaller playground at lunchtime, but it supports a young person within that mainstream environment, but that just needs that little bit more support. We also have an ARP at Rutledge, which is for our children with speech, language and communication needs. We have an ARP at Rickards, which is our girls' school, looking at speech, language and communication needs within our secondary provision as well. So there's a variety of provisions out there, and as we go down this journey and as we start talking to you and your school start talking to you, you start talking to Fran, these are the provisions that we can start looking at. But we do want to be able to develop our own provision. And so it's really important in Merton that we look at ensuring that our children's needs are met locally. And part of that is also about us thinking about how we can meet our children's needs locally to ensure they're part of local communities, local clubs, and that they have their local friends. We will transport children to and from school if they meet a transport criteria, but what we also know is that our young people need independent skills. So we want them to attend schools that allow them to develop those independent skills as well, in learning to travel to and from safely from school if they're able to do it, but also that they're able to, as I say, build their friendships and their social networks within their local community. And if you're transporting someone an hour or an hour and a half away every day, that reduces that down significantly. So again, having our young people at the heart of what we're thinking about when we're thinking about those secondary transfers. So to sum up, I think what I would say at this point in time is you've had lots of information thrown at you today on screen, which is always more difficult, with your youngsters in the background probably as well. This is the start of the journey, as we said on the first slide. This is an opportunity to meet the team, meet some of us, and talk to some